That was also the theme song of the Liberally Religious Youth, which preceded what is now YRUU, Young Religious Unitarian Universalists. And preceded, in fact, it was the first merger of the Unitarians and the Universalists happened in the youth. We would be one. And they let us, the youth let us into merger. So just a little trivia there. But it's history, and we're going to be talking about history today as we focus on the flaming chalice. So we gather every Sunday. Every Sunday. I want to point out that this, in and of itself, constitutes a religious practice. I often hear Unitarian Universalists lamenting our own lack of religious practices and the lack of religious practice associated with the tradition at large. But maybe it's not a lack of practice we have sometimes, at any rate, but a lack of recognition. And with that, perhaps a lack of intention. So I wonder if we treat with intention every Sunday service as a spiritual practice, if we recognize that Sunday mornings is part of our spiritual discipline, might this transform our sense that we lack such a thing? So I'm just going to say that we gather every Sunday for our spiritual practice. And since I have been here, the worship associates and I have worked hard to bring a discipline to this discipline, to bring a structure to the worship service. When I was first called to this pulpit, one of the resounding needs that I saw throughout the entire church, and in fact was asked to address on numerous occasions, was the need for coherence. And because I think spiritual practice builds perspectives and builds tools that we can use in our everyday, one of the first places that I look to shape our community and nurture our coherence is the worship service. And so we sought to bring some structure and focus. Now, be that as it may, not every Sunday is exactly the same. Some days we have choir. Some days we have wanderlust. And some days you're assaulted with a ukulele. Furthermore, this summer, if the structure feels a little bit too constraining to you, you will enjoy being here this summer because we're going to depart from it radically to get some air into the structure. And then if you go to other UU churches, of course, you will be hard-pressed to find any that do the same liturgy as we do or as each other does. And so there's a big scale. From highly structured and formal to rather haphazard and informal. And both have their place and function. On the array, there is a time and place for all. But one thing that does not change, one thing that is common from church to church and from service to service here at MVUU, is the lighting of our chalice. Almost every Unitarian Universalist church across the country and even around the world lights a chalice to mark this time as a holy time and to mark this gathering as a holy host. So what is this thing? You've heard me tell how it came to be. But I think we need to talk about what it means. And I pose the question to you. You could take out some writing instruments if you have them. This will be for you to take home, but it's worth doing I challenge you to write it down. In one sentence, What does the flaming chalice and its ignition mean to you? So take a minute, think about it. Eb's going to write it on his iPhone. Why not? Okay, so now I'd like to hear from one or two of you. In a single sentence, I have that in bold. In a single sentence, what does the lighting of the chalice mean to you? Would anybody like to express it?
Calls me home to my true self.
Do we have another? Thank you. We'll just hear from two more, but this would be an interesting topic of conversation at the luncheon today.
The lighting of the chalice for me means the light of hope and the energy of action.
The search for truth that lights the world.
Thank you. Those are excellent. I'm sure they resound and resonate with your own understanding of the lighting of the chalice. I want to continue to plumb that meaning a little bit. And one thing to note is that it hasn't always been this way, right? I mean, 1941 is when we first got the visual of it. So that means that our forebears and heroes like William Ellery Channing on the Unitarian side and Jose Ballou on the Universalist side, both of whom played key roles in our tradition's history, as well as our congregation's recent sermons, they didn't know this ritual. They didn't have this symbol. You may wonder, I wonder at any rate, if they had anything in its stead. And as soon as I asked that question of myself, I found myself confronting an interesting distinction. We make of the flaming chalice a ritual. We light it to signify certain things and to signal the beginning of holy time. But the chalice itself began its life not as a ritual, but as a logo. So is the question, did our forebears have a symbolically ritualized way of invoking sacred time? Or is the question, did they have a symbol that served as a logo, much like the Christian cross, Jewish Star of David, Star and Crescent of Islam, or the double-thumbed fist of the Gonzo Republic? Now, the answer to the later question I can give. They did, in fact, have logos. The Unitarian logo was a torch in front of an open book, which was generally understood to be the Bible, and above which was written the words in Greek, thanks Unitarians, truth in Christ. And below that were the large letters AUA, which stands for American Unitarian Association. The Universalists had a logo too. It was a Bible, which in this case was closed, surmounted by a cross, and below the motto in English, thank you, Universalists, was Christ will conquer. And all of that was surrounded by the words Universalist Church of America. And then after World War II, they kind of revamped that, and it just became an off-center cross in the circle, in the lower left quadrant, and they didn't have any words. So that's a little history of our predecessors and their logos. But I want to talk about, again, our current chalice symbolically. And if you'll recall, the initial Lisbon USC, Unitarian Service Committee flaming chalice was a symbol of safety or sanctuary in the midst of great jeopardy. It also hearkened, however unintentionally, to our Christian heritage. But that symbol, like our faith itself, has evolved. Let's plumb the meaning a little more, and as we do so, I just want to bring some attention to the chalice itself. This poor, forgotten member of this team of flame and chalice. I'm guilty of it too. You could see in the sermon title today. It was all about light and flame. And many of the responses that we heard today from you all also had to do with light and flame. So this poor chalice gets left out. But it's hugely important symbolically. A chalice basically is a cup, right? It's a container. And typically it contains nourishment. It has the ability to be portable and passed around and shared. And in this way, it is a symbol of community and welcome. It also resonates with the cup of Passover and the cup that Jesus passed during the Last Supper, the so-called Holy Grail, both of which are intended to convey a sense of salvation. And there are other cups as well. There are cups in the tarot and in pagan altars, which this was initially designed after. In Buddhism, the cup becomes a begging bowl and conveys the virtues of humility and sharing, because you would bring back what you received in the bowl and share it with your fellow monks. So in our chalice, as it evolves, we can at least and most prominently see the themes of a welcoming community, of safety, humility, and sacrifice in the chalice. Now, in our case, the cup does not hold wine, but rather fire. This is the fire of commitment, the spark of inspiration, the light of truth, the energy of action, the warmth of community. We're familiar. But let us also consider the fundamental property of fire. It's a change agent. Fire fundamentally transforms by illumination. Transformation by truth, then. And so in this flaming chalice, we have a teaching symbol of community, whose attributes of welcome, safety, humility, sacrifice, and truth-seeking transform those in that community into beacons of inspiration, action, love, and more, and ever more truth-seeking. So recently, the UUA, the Unitarian Universalist Association, thought it wise to revamp the logo. You can see it on the front of your order of service. This is our new associational brand. It's usually, in color, it's red, orange, ish. It changes colors. So no one asked me if we should do this or what it should look like. And my first reaction, honestly, was kind of perplexed. I wasn't enthusiastic, but I wasn't hostile to it either. I just didn't know quite where it was coming from or why. But you see, this logo is pure branding, pure marketing right here. It's designed to catch the eye of those outside of our tradition more than it is to guide the hearts of us inside the tradition. It's also a step out of our past. It's a step away from that Unitarian Service Committee logo into something new. So, it's important to note here that as religious liberals, our primary call is to constant revision. This is, in many ways, the definition of what it means to be a religious liberal, is to vision and revision, constantly seeking new depths to truth. And so we have revised our logo, and to be honest, I'm fine with it, I suppose. It's honest, it's a brand, it's hopeful in that it's reaching out, it's maybe a little bit desperate. And perhaps someday it too will take on more spiritual undertones. In the meantime, it has done something that is to me quite interesting. Because it is no longer the Unitarian and Unitarian Universalist Service Committee symbol, and because it is pure branding now, I feel like it has made a distinction between itself in some ways and our ritual, and has left our ritual to be pure ritual. This is a ritual that binds us together with our fellow Unitarian Universalists across the country. Think about that right now. All across this country, people are gathered in loving communities of conscience. And one thing which we do together every Sunday is light that chalice. In all of our diversity, here we have a point where we stand. Binds us across the country and here in this congregation. Binds us as a people of compassionate conscience here in this room. And I think when we look at it and consider its meaning, it has the possibility to shape our practice and so shape our lives. It calls us to be a community whose attributes of welcome, safety, and sacrifice transform us into beacons of inspiration, action, love, and truth-seeking.